so much. Books Are Magic, which when I lived in New York was my wonderful, beloved neighborhood bookstore and is a place that's doing so much for books and reading in Brooklyn. The other thing I wanted to do is quickly have each of our panelists, so we're going to focus tonight on social media, the performance of self, the exhaustion and burnout that comes from managing your social media accounts, especially whether you're a more private person or a less private person. But the other thing that I'm doing tonight is I'm donating $250 to an organization of each of the panelists' choice as a way of saying thank you. And just like, sometimes I need, ideas of new places to focus on or to pay attention to. So hopefully having some of these organizations on your radar will encourage you to kick in, $2, $4, whatever you have available. So let's just start. Let's go, Caroline. Who am I donating to today?
Yeah, so I chose For the Girls, which is it started out as a mutual aid fund to basically put money directly in the hands of trans folks who need it, either for like bill pay or gender affirming surgeries. And it's kind of blown up in the last few months, and I just want to keep that support going. So that's what I chose.
Awesome. Scaachi.
I actually picked the same charity, so I'm glad I don't have to give the spiel.
Elamin.
I picked the Audre Lorde Project because Books Are Magic in New York is hosting this. So the Audre Lorde Project is a queer people of color center that focuses on community organizing and focusing around whether it's like stuff like wellness work or justice work in the local community. So I like their mission, and I thought that is my pick.
Awesome. Bim.
I am giving to House of GG, which is an educational and historical center that is dedicated to trans and gender non-conforming people in Arkansas, USA. So it's a place for trans people, GNC people, non-binary people to kind of heal, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all that good stuff, but it's not in one of the usual spots. It's in Arkansas. So I hope that helps.
It's amazing. So the thing that I asked all of us to think about a little bit before this panel was just basically broadly, what is your relationship to social media in terms of how you have to cultivate your brand or your work, and what about it feels very exhausting or just tiring or fatiguing in general. So I kind of go backwards. So Bim, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I am horribly married to the internet is how I think of it. It's a terrible relationship. Nothing is good. I can't defend the internet to my friends. I just live with it. I'm just kind of like, it's a mess up. This is who I've chosen. I'm sorry. So that's where I'm at with the internet. I go through phases of quitting and, leaving it behind for a bit. But there are two fundamental problems with that. One, it's nice to be connected and to think of the world outside of myself. And two, I'm a show off. So it's very difficult to let go. I'm just like, guys, I'm so funny. I'm so funny. And if I get off the internet, you're just not going to get my jokes. And that's sad for you. So that's a problem that I have to overcome. But it's also a true problem. And it's not a bad problem to have. But it is something that I'm constantly grappling with, of kind of like, I don't want to be here. I have a long-standing joke that I just want to get married and log off. I need to marry rich, and I need to retire to a castle in Scotland. But until then, the internet has me. God damn it.
Bim, I kept offering to take you to Canada. You never took me up on any.
You know what? It was my mistake, and then you got married, and then
I got married and I moved here. Your loss.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Elamin, what about you?
Boy, first of all, Bim, I feel that acutely in terms of my jokes and feeling like the people need them. But also, and here's the part that I don't like, is that like I'm starting to think in internet jokes. Like my brain is starting to sort of rewire itself to be like, we'll make a good tweet. And like those are the only jokes I can think of. And now I will literally interrupt in the middle of a conversation and be like, that's a good tweet. And I'll write it down in the notes app as though it's like a thing that it's like currency. It's like I'm putting this in my back pocket so I can buy something with it later or something. It's fucking insane and I don't like it. But I think on a broad scale, the one thing that I'm noticing more and more about myself is how much I have to flatten myself in order to like appeal to people, because the more people follow you, the wider you have to cast your net, just as a person in order to like connect with more people. So like if you start to think of yourself in terms of a brand, which is an awful thing that you should never do, then you start to think like how can more people like this single piece of content? And in order to do that, you necessarily have to like widen, like zoom out and zoom out and zoom out until you get something so watered down, such a watered down version of yourself, so that more people can like it. And I think that is the worst thing about the internet.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like, you know, most people hate that idea of thinking of themselves as a brand, but as writers on the internet, like we are constantly fighting that and embracing that and hating ourselves and profiting from it. So it's a great cycle. Scaachi.
I feel like I work really hard actually to not have that relationship with the internet and to not feel that way about Twitter. And I think part of that is a functionality of I went upsettingly viral in Canada when I was 24, which like going viral in Canada is like being the most popular girl in a town of 5,000. Like it's not real. And like as soon as you move to the States, everyone's like, oh, good for you. Like, oh, that's did the Prime Minister call you? Which like he might have. But because of that, I think I learned the lesson really early that as soon as it's not fun, you can walk away from it and nothing will happen. Like if you leave the internet for as long as you want, you can come back at your leisure and it's not going to go away. And I think to equate it, I think it's perfectly fine to want to go on the internet for attention. That is the only reason I am there. And I think that's fine. And I think there's like a weird squeamishness about just admitting that you want people to look at you. I don't see anything wrong with that. I actually think it's more noxious if you're doing it because you think that like I need to build a brand and this is how people are going to know me. I bet you they won't, because the thing that actually does it is the work. But I'm thankful that I at least learned that when I was young and learned to leave when it gets sticky, and I do all the time.
And it seems to me like, especially with Twitter, like you're only on there when you feel like it. Like you're never like, I feel like I need to be on here a lot more than I am, or like I should check in on Twitter. You're just like, who wants an update about my dad? Feels like a good time to offer that update.
He's picking apples. He's mad at me all the time. Things are fine.
But that sounds kind of healthy in the sense of like you're talking about having some sense of, I guess, like agency over it, because sometimes like on my worst days, I'm like, no, I need the thing. I need the thing, which is the likes and the attention.
I mean,
I'm
not like, I'm not doing great. I will say a new thing that's happening in quarantine because I'm not seeing people enough is that very late at night, I'm going through my own feed and reading what I have said over the last few weeks. I'm like, and then I'll get in this very dark place and I'll turn to my husband and I'll be like, am I insane? Like, am I a crazy person and you're letting me run around and say these things? And he's like, what? What do you want?
Yeah, spending any time in your internet archive, like there's a little part of the book where I talk like what felt like to me, like the biggest admission that I made to myself about like sometimes I look at my Instagram feed to like try to remember who I am. Which is like not who I am, right? Like right. But something when I'm feeling displaced from myself, I like am trying to recover who that person is. And that's clearly not a good way to do it. But I do like, I mean, I joked about this when I tweeted about this event, but like I find you painting your nails like a very soothing escape. I like learn a lot about how nail painting happens, because oftentimes it looks like the background in Bim's shot right now, like how you do your nails. But what made you feel like that was something that you wanted to like just do? Like, was it just you were bored that you wanted other people to see it, that people asked for it? What was it?
I'm good at it and I wanted to brag.
Yeah.
Because people didn't believe that I did my own nails. And I was like, oh, I'll fucking show you that I do my own nails. We'll see how this lands. And listen, everything I do is out of spite. So I'm like probably the wrong person to ask that question, but I did it because I wanted to show people that I'm good at something. And I think that's okay. And then sometimes I don't do it because I don't feel like it. That's also fun.
And that's when I think like the joy or any sort of pleasure gets wrung out of it. You feel like you have to do it.
Yeah. I think taking away responsibility makes everything feel a lot better.
Yep. Caroline.
I mean, like I have so much of my relationship with the internet is unhealthy, but I also have so much of my career like because of my internet presence, and so that's like a hard thing to divorce after a while, because you look back on like, or rather I look back on like all the things and opportunities I got, you know, to write for this place, to write a book, to, you know, getting an email in my inbox literally from an editor at the Times 5 years ago saying like, I love your tweets, like we should talk, like do you ever want to write for the Times? Like that's an incredible thing that has happened. At the same time, it has sucked so much life out of me in like ways that I think are that I've had time, I think, to examine during the last like 8 months. Like, there's nothing else for me to do. And I also think of a lot of like the hustle culture, while I have a lot of faith that it will return in another weird, horrible form, like it did pause for a little bit. And so it gave me some time to be like, what do I want to be doing here? You know, how do I want to use this? Like, what do I actually want out of it? Am I just here to like dunk on like a dumb Bill de Blasio tweet? Like, what else could I be doing with my time? Like sitting back and kind of like reflecting on that is like, that's like a hard pill to swallow. But at the same time, sometimes, you know, it is sort of like being, you know, in like a casino type situation where you're like, oh, I like did this tweet and like people I wanted to noticed it, or like someone wants me to do a thing because they saw my commentary on this thing, and then you kind of are like just sending tweet after tweet being like, is this the one that will get me the thing? And it's like it's just an all day all consuming process. And I will say that a good friend of mine who is very online, but only as an observer and she does not contribute, which I love, maybe a year or two ago was like, so are you like still tweeting? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, it's like for free. And I was like, wow, I will never forget this incredible own. She's just like, you spend a lot of time doing this thing that no one's paying you to do. But like, you know, recently, I mean, I did deactivate my Twitter account, and that was a big deal for me. I don't know if I'll be back. I would love to think I'll never be back. But again, you know, all of us are on there because we're broken in the little ways, big ways. I'll miss the attention. I'll come back. But I think it was time to, you know, I needed a little bit of a break. Like there's nothing good there right now. Yeah. You know, there was a time when the internet had some fun stuff to offer and some joy, and now it's just horror after horror, and I was like, this is not doing anything for me.
Does it feel better or worse to sometimes be able to tweet or to like have your Instagram presence be under the brand of your podcast? Like, does that feel like you're kind of insulated to some extent, or does it feel like more work?
It definitely doesn't feel like work. I also think like, wait, were you asking me? Because I realized all of us have a podcast. Okay. Yeah. It does not feel like work. I will say that I am nicer. I am nicer on the podcast Instagram than I am on Twitter. And it's funny to see, I think people do parse themselves out differently. And I would never say I ever gave a three-dimensional perspective of myself on any one platform, but I enjoy being on the G Thanks Just Bought It Instagram more, because it's like, in the brand sense, it's just a nicer place. Cultivated, nicer conversations. Twitter is just like, I wouldn't say I'm personally mean, but I engage in like a lot of like let's just be mean to, you know, whatever politician is doing whatever today. And also like the other thing too is when you're not employed by a news organization that like curbs your ability to speak freely, which I was during the 2016 election, which I think saved me a little bit. Like I was realizing like, oh, I can go off the rails like super fast. Like this could go crazy pretty quickly. And you know, there's a lot that much freedom is like, I don't want to deal with that right now. You know, I have to cut myself off.
Then I loved following the Thirst Aid Kit Twitter account, RIP, and a space where you could like not have your voice be like, you know, it be you exactly. Like, did it feel diffused, or was it still work to find pictures of hot guys and tweet about them?
I mean, everything is work.
Yeah.
That's just where that's the world we've been born into and that we live in. Everything is work. I will say that it didn't matter to many people that we had a dedicated Twitter account for First Aid Kit. People still would at Nicole and I, and it was like, guys, the team isn't big, it's us. We're gonna see it. You don't have to do that. And like, people always, it's a lovely thing to have people who love the show and want to interact. But of course, people don't check and see what other people have said. They don't check what we've said. The thing that always got me every week was we would post, the first object of the week, and somebody would be like, hey, did you talk about blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, you should listen. It's a great podcast. You should have a listen. You'll see. You should try it. And it's kind of difficult to because again, there are people who listen to the show who know us, who like us, and then there are people who discover us by accident and just kind of like, hey, did you do, or did you whatever, or the people who would tell us who to cover, and we'd have to say, hey, maybe you're new here. We don't take requests. Thank you so much for listening. But we don't care to hear what you think we should do. But we're gonna keep making content. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it. But we're not gonna. You don't get to tell us this bit. But we embrace the interaction in other places, but not on this. And so people having to kind of learn, and it's that thing about doing a sort of introduction to your product every single week, which is fine and is the basis of the work. It's not a problem. But it does get a little bit tiring, just in a human way, because it's the same thing often again and again. But no, I never felt there was a big difference. Nicole actually handled the bulk of our Twitter interactions, and we developed a very specific voice, and every so often there'd be like a contentious tweet or something, and we'd both be like, what should we say here, or how should we address this? And then that would be a more collaborative. And of all things, I was mostly on our Tumblr side, actually, which Tumblr is my favorite place on the internet. It's my happiest place. It's perhaps my longest running internet place. So that's a joy for me. But my Instagram is private, and has been for many years. And I will never unlock it because I often mock dickheads from Twitter on my Instagram. So they don't need to see that. So, it's a private place with me and my friends. But also, really and truly, Instagram doesn't feel like a place where people who don't know me should be. Like, that's where I cook, and that's where I kind of long for a dog, very, especially. And that's where you see the inside of my house, and I do tours of my plants. And that's a friend place. Twitter is like a mix of work and friend stuff. And every so often, I remember that if a friend is interacting with me on Twitter, I can pick up the phone and call them. And that is helpful for me. But I don't think of Twitter necessarily as a job. Like, it's just like, it's a sort of an annoyance that's also still really fun for me. I joked about being a show off, but I think there's a real kind of exchange of pleasure on Twitter still, even amongst most of it being like a huge skip fire. There's still a lot of joy on Twitter for me. But it also means that, once I got that thing about, reducing replies, oh my God, amazing. Because now I can ask a rhetorical question and people don't respond. I kind of be like, did you mean? And I'm like, no, Clippy, I did not mean. Like, don't stop that. Let me get this joke off, okay? You don't have to correct me. You don't have to give me an answer to what is clearly a rhetorical device, sir. It's very, I hate that so much. So I have a gift that I use often. It's a wine glass that somebody has drawn arms on, and it's screaming, and and I always reply like, let the joke breathe, let it breathe. It's just a joke. You don't have to respond, sir. I didn't say that word because I didn't want to use that word. I write for a living. I'm very good at it. Also, I'm incredibly funny. This joke was perfectly constructed. I know, I tested it in a factory beforehand. And it's weird having to tell people like, no, I said what I meant and I meant what I said. Like, I'm almost 40. I've been doing this a while. It's very odd, but bless everyone. I enjoy that, because the good thing is, of course, I also turn off response. I don't see a lot of replies because people are annoying.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth my time. I don't want to be on the internet angry. I don't want to be there kind of swelling with rage. Just to what end? Why are we here? Life is so bloody short. Why would I be on the internet kind of going, and another thing, no one cares, sit down. That's how I feel.
I do love that the way to make Twitter the place where everyone is talking to one another enjoyable is to make sure you can't hear what anyone else is saying. This
100%. It's I mean, no one really cares. And even people, you'll say something and somebody will reply with exactly what you said. I'm like, you didn't even read what I said, bro. Come on. So, who are we fooling? Just turn the whole thing off. No one needs Twitter. No one needs it. The people who have found communities there, I'm so pleased for them. I have found communities on there. Some of my good friends in real life have come from Twitter, who I've met, and we've become friends. We go to houses, we go on holiday. We are people to one another. And the rest of it, you're kind of like, oh, this is all unrelenting shit. And then you can just kind of moonwalk out really simply. Like, I don't feel a pressure, and I'm never performing so much on Twitter. Like, it's definitely not all of me, but it is me. It's not all of it, but it's me. And so I think of Twitter as a place where I just get to dump very specific, select thoughts, and engage where possible. And if not, peace out. I often will ask a bit of advice and then delete the tweet, because otherwise you'll get responses forever. And again, I'm like, I don't want that. So it's a good thing to just kind of, you find the way of Twitter that, for example, that works for you. And Instagram, I don't even interact on there. And on Tumblr, I don't even use my real name. So I've had that account for almost a decade. No one from Twitter knows well, a few people, because I wasn't so judicious at the beginning, but a few people know who I am on Tumblr, but no one knows. My name is not anywhere. No one's looking necessarily at my little icon, which has my face. It's great. I go on Tumblr, and that's where I get to be a fan, and also where I get to be really mean, and where I get to kind of just enjoy being on the internet as an anonymous idiot. But on Twitter, of course, then it ties to my job at, previously at The Guardian, then at BuzzFeed News, now at This American, and I'm like, you don't need to know that. Like, you'll find, if you like me on the radio, you'll like me on the radio, it's fine. But we don't have to be friends on the internet elsewhere. But yeah. Tumblr, I'm just kind of like, oh, it's all here. I let everything hang out there.
Do other people have like parts of their lives, either their personal lives or just like their professional lives, that they try not to like make consumable on the internet, right? Like to try to just keep it for yourself.
Like, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. No, I think there are things that I like. There are things that I read about that I'm not interested in, like having conversations on the internet about.
Right.
Just because people don't engage in good faith with those things, or they're just. It just feels even weird because I'm like, it's not a part of my brand to talk about this. But there's no space to talk about them, and so you're not interested in exactly what Bim was talking about. Now, like, I remember a time when Twitter was kind of a nice place. Like, I think about those days often. I think about those days fondly, because I think like there's something that keeps us going back to that platform, and maybe it's because we all secretly would like the best for it. Like, we all secretly would like Twitter to just be less of a shitty place, because we remember maybe some of those nice moments. But now they feel like they're gone, like everything is broken. But like I don't know, Bim, like, do you remember when Twitter was nice? Is that a thing for you?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it was a sillier place for sure, but then the world was also a little less serious, And again, This is like, I moved to America 4.5 years ago, and British Twitter back then was just like a bit of kind of like politics stuff, but essentially a place for like really stupid British humor. Yeah. And within British humor as well, there's like Scottish Twitter, there's Irish Twitter. So it's like, there's a bunch of stuff. And on top of that, I'm also Nigerian. So you would get like African Twitter, specifically Nigerian Twitter, very amazingly South African Twitter, which is amazing. It's so rude and raunchy and funny and just like hilarious. So I had like a good like stew of different Twitters, and each one had a very specific flavor. And there was, I guess, a time when, it's that John Mulaney joke when, he's talking about Trump and he's like, oh, you didn't have any of these issues with the other guy. And he's like, in my defense, I wasn't paying attention. And I feel, like that's basically where a lot of people are. It's kind of like the shit that's bad now wasn't affecting that many people, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so they just, and the people on the internet were kind of like, oh, everything's fine. I mean, what was troublesome then remains troublesome and got more so. But you weren't paying attention. So it felt like, oh, it was just a nicer place. And people kind of like, no, we're dying. And it's like, it's nice, it's fine. So, that's part of it too.
There were I mean, Elamin, you could be like, oh, it was so nice. The only thing I can think of was like, do you guys remember Vagina Plane? Yeah, Vagina Plane was like a great day on Twitter. It was like
that was a good day.
So good. American Airlines, or like, a very big corporate airline. It was one of those times. It was like people were still kind of new to Twitter, where it would be like people were often being like, oh, like shit, I just tweeted a DM.
Right.
Like I meant to like DM this person and I tweeted. they literally tweeted a picture of like a woman with a plane in her vagina, and it was like an American Airlines and it was like they didn't take it down for 4 hours. Like the day was like over. Like everyone was like, everyone's office, everyone's newsroom was like kicking back. I think I had to write like 6 different blog posts about the vagina plane. It was like, they just tweeted this. Oh, the tweet is still up. And like, that was fun. And now it's like, you know, more Nazis.
Yeah.
More out and proud Nazis, I guess. But like, yeah, I mean, and then also the idea that like everything was there to like break the internet, like kind of came like everything. I think what was great about Twitter back in the day was that everything really was organic. Like, I feel like there were times where you would see like these great things go viral, and they were like real things that had happened and that were just going viral. And then all of a sudden it kind of spun into like, oh, it's like part of a Jimmy Kimmel like sketch that we're gonna like premiere later. And then it's like, no, it's not fun anymore. You know, I feel like it was very, when it was raw, there was like a lot, you know, it was great.
I think Elamin, like having memories of nice Twitter is maybe more a testament to Elamin's temperament than like reality. I think that's he views things in a nice
mean?
I'm trying to give you a compliment and you're making it very hard.
I am asking what you mean. We don't have to do this on a live stream.
I'm saying that you are an optimist and you see nice things in the world, and I see garbage. If anybody needs a catalog of the worst of the internet when it started, let me know. But I don't remember that either.
Got you.
So I think we're gonna have some good questions from the audience, and I think a lot of them kind of mesh with some of these larger questions. So do any of you have Finstas or more private accounts on social media that you use differently than your main ones? Bim already answered this. Does anyone else have a Finsta? I'm too old, I think, to have a Finsta.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I don't have a Finsta.
I'm gonna go find Scaachi's Finsta.
I will give you $1 million if you find it.
Okay.
Do you actually have one? I don't have one.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't have a Finsta. What do you, I just, there's no point. It's kind of like when people like mute people. I'm like, don't mute them, just block them. Life's too short. I don't even mute people. I'm like, no, I want you to know that I'm not fucking with you anymore. Good day. Peace out.
How do you spy on people, Bim? How do you spy on people?
I don't spy on people because this is part of the thing. So I found a tweet of mine recently where I said that maybe 10 years ago, 50% of my internet consumption was hate reading. Like there was a blog, there was a blog that it would give me a delicious pleasure to like click on it and kind of roll my eyes and hiss and kind of be like, this fucking idiot. Like it was pleasurable. I would get a rush. It was like, I don't know, I've never tried heroin, but I imagine it's up there of just like flooding your body. And then after a while, I was like, you're a big woman. What the fuck are you doing? Like this is, first of all, you are clicking on somebody's ad revenue supported fucking blog. That's one. Two, truly, what is the pleasure here? You fucking idiot. So I kind of spoke to myself. I took myself to the red table and I was like, Bim, do you want, thanks for noticing that. Cheers, friends. But really, I was kind of like, who is this? What is the point of hate reading? And that was, I went super cold turkey. I stopped doing any of that. So now I try my best I don't do any of the things that I think could escalate into really bad behavior. So I don't spy. If I try to tell myself, if I don't care, I literally do not care. And then if I do want to go and spy, I have a look on I make sure that I'm not kind of sleepy so I don't accidentally like or follow you. But I go through it, I roll my eyes, and then I go to bed and I wake up the next morning and I'm like, okay, have some coffee and get on with that. Yeah. And that's it. So like I have a fairly, I like to think slightly more healthy consumption etiquette of the internet now, because like I said, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this. I get up now and I make this sound. So I'm old. And so I'm just kind of like, I don't want to spend my time on the internet like as an old person, fucking Grandpa Simpson, like shaking my fist. It's like, come on. I'm so old. I'm so old and I'm so tired. It's like, I haven't got time for this.
So when you guys are feeling like exhausted, burned out, whatever word you want to use in the rest of your life, does social media ever make you feel good, or does it always make you feel worse? Because for me, sometimes I'm so tired, but and I only have energy to just go on Instagram. And like, I'm like, I don't want to be doing this right now. And yet here is what I am doing. I'm not choosing the choice I want to make. So what do you guys think about?
I think the only like internet thing that gives me comfort in that state is TikTok, and it's primarily because I'm not contributing. So I can just watch like funny things and cute things, and people wear like cute outfits and dogs or whatever. And then like every so often I happen upon something ugly, but because I'm not participating, I don't actually feel any pressure to say something or to point out that this is bad. And I just go like, oh, gross. And then I keep scrolling. So that feels like the only place that I actually now go to when I'm exhausted. I've stopped looking at Instagram when I'm tired, because it's just like the Discover page at this point, despite my best efforts, is all diet pills and like women showing their weight loss stuff, and it's really weird in there for me now, and I don't know why, like, because I've stopped looking at it. And then Twitter is obviously work, so it's just not really a soothing place. But TikTok feels like, for me, this nice place to be like, what are the teens doing? Oh, they're dressing up like clowns. Good for them. I'm never
And the work that you do is like choosing whether you like it or not, and then the algorithm just gets better and better at feeding you the things.
And the other thing is I forget about it too. Like when I go through like my likes the next day for legal purposes, when I'm looking at TikTok, I'm drinking wine and nothing else. But when that happens and the next day I look at it, it's like, I don't remember any of this. Like, and it's funny again. And I get it.
TikTok really is that like we all have sort of like, we are too old. It's like when seeing like what 17-year-olds are wearing, like we don't have to wear it. So like we don't have to worry about it. Like no one's expecting me to make a TikTok. Pressure's off. I can just enjoy. Like I think it's great. 5 years ago, I think we all would have felt a lot differently about TikTok. I think it would have been, our bosses would have been like, it's your job to make TikToks. And we'd all be friggin' miserable. But it's wonderful.
Well, it's someone's job to make it. It's just not ours, which is wonderful.
Right. Like BuzzFeed hired young people to make TikToks instead of asking us.
Teenagers making it, which is correct.
Yes.
That was a good call. That was a totally reasonable call on that part.
Truly.
Okay, so let's see. How do you handle the way that some social media, thinking especially of Instagram, is taking the place of real life and interacting with others in a huge way since the pandemic? Not being able to see my friends means I'm obsessively looking at their Instagrams and updating my own, especially the stories. And I'm thinking especially like, you know, Caroline just moved, like Bim, you're not in the UK, Scaachi, you're not in Canada. Like how the only person here whose country is functioning, the place that they're living is functioning normally is Elamin.
Is it functioning normally? Did you see the COVID numbers in Ontario?
It's fine.
It's real
It's better.
I mean, Ontario, Scaachi.
Yeah.
It's proportionally, they're doing worse than New York State.
Scaachi,
Okay.
it can't be as bad as America. Stop
Oh,
trying.
bar. I'm not interested in hopping over the bar and saying I did it. Like that's not enough for
I
me.
am for the purpose of this panel. I am.
But okay, so question like that reliance on our contact through social media, and sometimes I think like I oftentimes I feel so like tired or down or whatever word you want to use, depressed, like that it feels like a lot to actually, you know, do the work to have a safe, socially distanced contact with someone in the real world. And so instead you rely on these like low calorie interactions on Instagram, which do not feel nourishing. So have you guys been dealing with that at all? Have you found a way to not do that?
I call everybody that's close to me once a week. They hate it, but I do it anyway. And they have to sit on the phone with me in some capacity for half an hour, and no one likes it, but they'll do it and they'll shut up about it. That's fine. But I think like I agree. I think like the social media interactions I have with my friends are really unsatisfying because it's for everybody. So it's like I don't really like, okay, great. Like I saw the thing that whatever you posted, that's fine. But I think the real meat is it like picking up the phone and doing this, which did you know that your phone makes phone calls? I forget that all the time. Or like FaceTiming. I think that's really big with babies because a lot of my friends have kids.
Yep.
And they're not posting anything on like Instagram, and like I'm not seeing like, oh, you got a new soother, good for you, so cute, where'd you get it? Like, you got to scream at a baby in her face and you got to get her to remember it. And now those babies remember me. And when I call, they cry. But it worked. It worked.
Other people?
I mean, I don't know. Caroline, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so my computer went, I don't know what Scaachi said. My computer like totally just
I
like
said I was
blanked
screaming
out.
at babies on FaceTime.
Oh, well, what else is new? I think I enjoyed social media a little bit more when I felt like we were all on the same page back in March and April, even though it was like a more like horrible time in terms of the pandemic. I felt like we were all like agreeing that we weren't going anywhere. I think the thing that's been troubling to me is that the people I'm seeing like going places again. And I think that like that part of social media and connecting feels difficult to me because I now feel like we're on different planes of like what people want to do in terms of how to connect and what people are comfortable with. And like, I'm very happy to get on a group chat or like a Zoom with a friend, but then I feel like some people are like going out and like doing stuff. And so I much preferred this idea when we all kind of understood social media was the only way we were going to be able to communicate with each other, and like no one was showering or like getting dressed. And I feel like once everyone sort of split off of that pain, then being on Instagram felt a little bit more stressful because we were no longer all going the same speed. Like some people were, you know, going on vacation like there was nothing. You'd see some people eating in restaurants and like that, you know, that would make me like stressed out. So I'm happy to use social media as like a way to keep in touch, but I also feel like if I'm not sure where everyone else is, then I have a harder, like, obviously, of course, you're probably down for a Zoom because like that's what we're doing. Meanwhile, that person like just went on vacation. So that's been a little bit hard to parse. You know, people are very proudly posting, which is very interesting to me.
Right. And if it makes you angry all the time, and if you're just sitting there in that like stewing in your anger, like Bim said, it's not a place to be, right? Like I don't like myself when I'm doing that.
Right.
Like,
I still can't help it though. Sorry, Elamin, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's just social media has never really been a place for like meaningful connections with friends for me. Like I don't think that's a thing that I've looked for social media to do ever. I think it's like really good for a lot of broad interactions. It's really good for, you know, specific interactions on like an issue. Like if we're talking about one specific thing, we can get pretty deep on that. But like as soon as like those relationships begin to deepen, like you maybe move into text messages, maybe move into phone calls. At least for me, most of my interactions with people happen on group chats. I've also been like very lucky to do, you know, like a lot of like park hangouts, just a lot of just like, we'll sit in a park away from each other and just do that. Cause like, I don't think I can function in a week if I don't do that with a couple of friends. Like I just need it. But group chats are probably where like 80 or 90% of my communications with people happen, whether they're on Facebook or like I guess like Messenger. That's the only place where those interactions can take place, or WhatsApp or like Signal. But that's about it. I don't see how you can maintain a meaningful relationship in the Instagram DMs. Like if you can, go for it. But that's
group chat's a real lifesaver right now.
Yeah. Here's a good one. As a Black woman this summer and yesterday, I found myself judging my friends' allyship, wokeness, or anti-racist efforts based on things they post on Instagram or their tweets. Is this normal, and how can I stop? Because yesterday I once again tagged out.
Oh yeah. I mean, people are really awful. That's just the long and short of it. It's a very difficult thing to kind of to be engaging in this moment and to have people I don't know. I think it's all of us are in this world. We're all kind of in the middle of things that are happening. And it's kind of like the bacon and egg situation, right? Like the chicken only has to give eggs, the pig has to give itself, right? And a lot of the time I'm feeling like bacon in these conversations and in these whatever's happening in the world. And so there's only so much of myself that I can give over to that. It's a very difficult thing. I think everyone's mileage varies and differs based on what you are able to give that day. My bandwidth yesterday and today was just like massively curtailed. I don't want, like I mentioned I did like a little throwaway tweet earlier on today where I said, you know, not everyday jokes, some days despair. And somebody replied and said, here's what's giving me hope. And I replied, I didn't reply to them, but I replied to my tweet and I was like, man, I should have turned off replies on this. And to their credit, the person was like, that was lame, I'm sorry. And they deleted their reply. And I was grateful for that, but I was still a little bit kind of like, the fuck, you know, when it happened. But they recognized it and I want to acknowledge that. And so I think it's a difficult thing for you to be in certain conversations depending on the topic. And my advice is for you to figure out what you can live with. And then, yes, some days there's no remedy. You just log out, you tag out, you don't go to any of the places where you are expected to kind of give bacon when you don't. I don't know. The older I get, the more I realize, and I'm grateful for this, the more I realize where my thresholds are. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, oh, this is not serving me in any way. And in fact, might be actively harming me. So I'm just going to peace out. And there's no stress beyond the stress that I'm already feeling, like vibrating with, but I don't have to add on to that. And I think that's the way I go about it. It's kind of like, I want to be involved, but at what cost? And so you figure out what works for you, and then you remove yourself the minute that line gets compromised, because you're ultimately harming yourself. And it's just not worth it. So I guess it's a thing that you have to kind of get to.
Yeah. Other thoughts on that? I hear a lot of white people who are like, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Like, I'm always doing it wrong. And you're like, yeah, live with that. Like, live with that feeling of like, you know, not knowing, like fucking up a lot. And just keep trying to listen and be better. But like, that's just what you got to live with.
But can I also suggest that like there's something about the forced arena of social media that makes it feel like that's where people are processing their thoughts, and like that is the initial flaw, right? Like that is the initial flaw that we all begin with, because like you're feeling something, and so you look to social media to see like that feeling maybe validated or reflected somewhere, and I feel like that is something that we've kind of become pretty accustomed to, especially in the last 4 years, just like looking to see other people be like, hey, are you feeling this thing too? But the problem is, if that keeps happening, then eventually you get to a point where you're like, I don't know how to process my feelings or my emotions or my rage publicly anymore. I just don't have the language for it. I did it last week. I'm going to do it again next week, but like today is not the day for that. And maybe sometimes it feels like people don't care, when in reality they just like don't have the tools to even process things out loud, or want to bend to the pressure of doing that. And like fundamentally, social media is a terrible tool for doing it. So like, I don't know why we keep doing it, but also I get why we keep doing it, because it's the only place we have.
That's such a good point. Any other thoughts here? Yeah, like public grieving, like the performance of grieving and of grief, like there are so many other ways that like not everyone wants to process in the same way, right?
Yeah, I just don't respond when there's like beyond the grief that we're all kind of feeling globally. Whenever there's like a specific person, I simply do not, I simply pretend not to see it, because to even put that out there, and this, you know, I saw it, this again happened post Chadwick Boseman's passing. And I just put a little, again, nothing specific to him. I was shocked, and I found myself crying. And he wasn't like a person that I was like, oh my God, I live for the next Chadwick movie or whatever. But it was just like the shock of it. And he was so young, and the fact that he had this disease for so long and so on. And I just went online and I said, fuck cancer. And somebody again replied and was like, oh, is this going to be the first, first object who has like died? And I was like, and that's, and again, I think they were just kind of responding to something, but I'm like, I think about it as kind of like access also confuses things. I think people can reach you, so they're just kind of like, oh, here's the thing, and I'm like, I don't know you, you don't know me even. Like, we consume one another. Like, I consume a lot of, you know, some of the people I chat to online are in fact real life friends, people whose phone numbers I have and whose homes I've been to and children I've kissed and all that stuff. So like, there's any number of things that way. But then also, I think, especially since we're all kind of like in people's ears via podcasts, I think there is very much a confusion of the intimacy of of podcasts, and like, oh, that person is, people say it's my friend in my head. And you know, there was that other, I can't remember who tweeted it, but this thing, maybe it was what's his face at the New York Times, Asted, and he said something like, you know, when people say my friend, do you just mean a black person you follow on Twitter? And I'm just like, that's a constant question. I'm like, is that your black friend, or is she just literally a journalist who is black that you follow on Twitter and sometimes interact with? Because that's not your friend, fam. That's not your friend. So it's like this question of kind of like the intimacy of social media. It kind of fosters, it feels closer than it actually is sometimes. And that is confusing. And I don't envy anyone trying to navigate that. I understand, like Elamin said, I understand the confusion that comes up because access and the ability to, like, you can DM people, you can DM freaking celebrities, like shit like that can happen. It's weird. So how much more so like a journalist who tweets stuff that you find funny and that you like their writing, of course you feel like you know them and they know you. And the reality is that you don't. So it's kind of like this weird thing of just like having a similar feeling doesn't give you the right to kind of like ask for more or ask for deeper. People will say, you know, what are your thoughts on X? And I'm like, I don't want to share them with you. I reserve that right. You know, that's okay. Like, it's fine. Like, I have very deep feelings about this particular issue, this person, this moment, whatever. I am not obligated to share that with you. And also, you don't have to ask. You can accept it if it comes and look the other way if it doesn't. And that's another thing that I think, again, the older I get, the more I'm just like, and I've never felt, to be fair, I've never felt to perform for people. I don't really think of even the people who follow me on Twitter as an audience per se. I think of them as just kind of flotsam and jetsam. Like, we're all in the ocean together and we're all just kind of like smashing against one another. And sometimes there's a nice feeling, but a lot of the time you're just like, you know, you're just bric-a-brac in the ocean. Everyone is.
Well, and sometimes you crash into Chris Evans in the ocean. I
mean, Chris is obviously a very dear friend. We've been to each other's homes. But yeah, sometimes Chris Evans is one of the flotsam. No, I'm kidding. It's not, but this is another thing as well. Like, I've seen people have DM'd me or like sent messages to kind of go, hey, literally, I've had this request more than once. Could we get into a DM with me, you and Chris, and then you leave? And I'm like, first of all, fam, no. Second of all, no. Don't do, people do. Anyway, the internet is a very weird thing. And this is again what I mean about literally someone brought that to me as a sort of nifty way that they could talk. And I'm like, first of all, me and Chris are not friends. Like, bro, what are you doing? Again, this idea that if someone follows you and you follow them, and I'm like, he is literally a megawatt star. And that was the other thing as well. Even when he followed me, I didn't know he followed me. People were like, how does it feel? And I was like, what? It's very weird to be on the internet in this age. I will say that, because you suddenly have these horrible insights into human behavior, and it's both terrifying and incredibly illuminating. And you get to understand a bit of human behavior in a way that you hadn't thought of before.
So one thing I've heard, this is building on a question that's in the chat, is that like, oftentimes people who have established themselves as we have, we can be like, oh, you can just walk away from social media, right? Like, that's just something you can do. Whereas I think if you're trying to establish yourself, even if your writing is spectacular, it's a lot harder to do if you're not having those conversations, if you don't have that reach. Like, the reality of the system, as broken as it is, like, if to get a book deal, they look at your Twitter followers and your social media reach and all that sort of thing. So what advice do you think that we could give to people who are trying to start careers in our fields broadly about what kind of relationship is necessary and what definitely isn't, but you might assume is necessary? Scaachi, what would you tell yourself at 24?
Run. I mean, if you're just sort of starting out and you need it to sort of build a platform, then the nice thing is that it should be less toxic in theory. If you don't have the kind of audience that flocks to you partly because they want to yell at you, which I think, I mean, that's certainly true for me. I imagine that's true for a few people here. I think you need to pick and choose what you want to engage with. And so maybe your Twitter presence is you sort of talking about the things you find interesting. The nice thing is Twitter has rolled out a no reply function, and you can block the replies as you see fit. I don't know that it's actually that essential. I really don't, because I think if you have that platform, that's nice, that's icing. But if there's no cake, nobody cares. No agent is going to care if you don't have anything written. They're not going to care if there's no manuscript, if it's fiction. They don't give a shit if you haven't actually gone and gotten yourself published. And I think the trap that a lot of, and I can only speak to writers and like creatives in that space, because I don't do anything else, but a lot of people get trapped in that space where they think, oh, I need to create a brand and that's how I'm going to be successful. Well, you're doing it backwards, because, and that was sort of the thing that always frustrated me when people talked about like my work, that they were like, you went viral so you could sell a book. I sold that book first. Right. It was your mistake to make me bigger. That's your fault. I didn't do shit. I was sitting at home minding my own business and you stepped in it. That has nothing to do with me. But all that stuff happened before. And like none of the work that I have done has come to me purely because I'm an asshole on Twitter. If anything, there's a lot of people who won't hire me because I'm a garbage person, and they're right. They shouldn't, because I would ruin them. But then there's like a small corner of the world that would. That's all icing. That's nice stuff that I get to play with, but none of that built my career. My career will not hinge upon it. And if there was not the work, then none of that matters. And I think you see that time and time again. There's lots of people who like write books because they have a big Twitter presence. And where are those books? You don't see them anymore. And then they end up in like, you know, the horror of that $1 bin or whatever, like in like that's where they go, because they're not sustainable. And so if you want to be like a flash in the pan, that's very, very doable. You would need to go viral, but the people who really make long careers, there's work somewhere, and there's writing, and there's talent, and there's effort, and it's exhausting, and there's, you know, it's not just about going on Twitter and waiting for people to give you roses. Sometimes you got to go out with your bat and your knife and cut them yourself and put them in a vase and tell everybody, look at them, look, I got them. Would you like to give me more? I have these, give me more. And that's how you do it.
Can I just add to that I see a mistake that a lot of people who want to spend more time writing, whether they're journalists or writers, they make the fatal mistake of tweeting their best thoughts when someone could pay you for them.
Tweeting
like,
it.
Yeah, like don't tweet your entire pitch. Go pitch it somewhere, because go spend more time, figure out how to position that to an editor. Instead of just being like, here's a thought, and like maybe that thought's gonna get 30 retweets and congratulations on that, but like it could help you in achieving what you want if you spend more time refining it and reaching out to an editor and be like, look, I have this thing, is it anything? And then, you know, you get into a back and forth, and maybe 10 editors will hate it, but the 11th might like it. But like just giving out your best thoughts for free is like, I don't get why that's worth it for anybody. I stop tweeting out your best pitches. Like just stop.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about Twitter and stuff like that is that it does give more visibility to people that maybe historically wouldn't have got that sort of visibility. And that's certainly why I liked Twitter at the beginning, because I was having a hard time getting people to look at me and to pay attention to the stuff that I was doing. But there was still stuff like that there was still an email, and there was still a pitch, and there was still writing to be done. And I think, you know, it's not enough to go to an editor and say like, look at my tweets. Like that's never going to be enough.
I truly literally like got a book agent because of going viral on Twitter. And so like I can tell you that like the days where like someone would get a book deal from like their like Tumblr account, or that ended in like 2012. Yeah. Like it really is, that moment is over. Like people found out really quickly. Like every book you saw at Urban Outfitters in 2011 did not really sell, you know? And I think that like
you're also a really good writer. Like that's right. And you're a good podcast. Like you've got like that's my concern is when you boil it down to like,
sure.
Like that's not it.
But when I started, it was because I had the Away Message Twitter account, and it was just like a throwback to, you know, 2004, and it got like, you know, 300,000 followers overnight or whatever. And an agent reached out to me. She's still my agent now. And she's like, we should write a book about this. And I cannot watch Pen 15 because I consider it a crime that I'm not writing for that show. I'm so mad I didn't come up with that. I would have been perfect for it. But it wasn't, and I was so sure. And I remember those days in 2012, when like I was doing nothing, and then all of a sudden I was tweeting from this account that had 300,000 followers, and like people I really respected were like, oh my god, this is like the best parody. This was when parody Twitter was like, you know, acceptable.
Oh god.
Very not anymore.
Such a different world.
Risk it now.
And we tried selling this book, and it just like didn't sell. And I think very quickly it was like, you know, it's just like not an, I think people really figured out like 8 years ago ish that it was like, okay, you know, following someone on Twitter is free, but there's a barrier to entry to having to actually pay $15 at a bookstore to read what you wrote, especially like Elamin said, if you're doing it for free already on Twitter. And I think that that's, you know, that's really hard. And you come from like a digital editorial space where you are used to like, oh, your post got 400,000 views, or like 2 million people read your post. Like those numbers do not transfer to the book world. Like they just don't. Like there's just nothing comparable to people being able to click for free. It's just a low barrier to entry. And the publishing world figured that out like 2 years after they put a lot of money into making Tumblr. But the most, I think the best advice that I could give anybody is like, you know, the internet is very different. If you're starting out and you're like, okay, I have to build a brand on the internet, like nothing that we did is going to be the same thing that you will do. It's just a different place now, you know? But I think the most important piece of advice is like, have an opinion about a handful of things and share that opinion. You know, no one wants to be the person who has something to say about everything. Like, that's not interesting. Like, pick your lane, or like your few lanes, and like get into it. And like, you know, I don't know. I just like anything I say would just be like not helpful. Go make a TikTok account. I can't do it. So
I had a journalism teacher who used to say that you should be like a mini expert on like a few niche things that are just yours, and like go and figure out a way to write about those things. And I think that's partly what I ended up doing. I mean, my interests are like weird and gross and dumb, and like, you know, I had no idea in high school my interest in neo-Nazis would end up being so fruitful later. But like that ended up being like the thing that worked. And I think if you end up being a little expert in something and you tweet about it, that's when people start paying attention. And if you have a voice that's better and a point of view, I think is really important, more so than like anything else.
I mean,
and don't try to be funny if you're not funny. I can tell.
I kind of want to echo what Caroline said. I just feel so strongly. I mean, I made the joke earlier about being old, but I think, yeah, it means that I think I was one of the last group of people to have a journalism degree. Like, I went to university and I studied journalism, which now is essentially, you know, let's get you in your rocker, grandma, every time I say that, but that's basically how I feel. But that's what I mean. Like, I just feel like it feels odd when, you know, there was a thread recently, like, what advice would you give to, and I was like, nothing I say has nothing. I'm so old in this. Like, my first job out of university was on a newspaper, and a local newspaper at that, in London. Fam, that, every time I speak about that now, it's like the wind. It's not a thing that exists anymore. So for me to stand in a place and kind of be like, and here's my advice to you, Gen Z, it's like, fam, no, first of all, I have nothing to offer you. My experience of the internet is different. My experience of journalism is very different. The fact that, you know, my degree was like a multimedia, even saying it, I feel like I'm crumbling to dust. It was a multimedia journalism degree where we did radio and we did TV and we did, it's like, fam, I feel utterly useless when people ask this question, because I'm just like, I honestly don't know what to tell you. And I'm not being rude, and I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper, and I'm not being dismissive. I'm just saying that a world in which I used to do Bim's 10 things, and a world where I was doing, you know, like, that was pure Tumblr culture. And Tumblr culture is essentially Angel Fire culture, which is essentially, you know, there's like all these old freaking Netscape rooms and AIM. Like, I'm so old. I have an AIM name. Like, listen, I have nothing to offer in this current. I am accidentally legacy media because I've been doing this for so long, and I know I look very young. Shout out to my genes, but I'm not young. I'm so old, and so every piece of advice that I give feels automatically dated. But I do think the important things about having an opinion about something is very good. The other thing I would add to that is, of course, an actual knowledge. I think that's another problem. I think a lot of people think that an opinion is enough, and it's not, and it doesn't get you as far as you would hope. It's nice to have a strong, hard feeling, but that has to be kind of rooted in like deep knowledge of something so that you are able to back up that opinion and make it sing. And I think that's a problem as well, where so much of what we're told is kind of like going to be a big thing is just like, just have an opinion and go out there and say it as a pundit or whatever. And I'm like, I'm sure there's a lot of money in that game, but you do get kind of, you get found out quite quickly. And either you have a sort of integrity to kind of be like, I don't know shit, or to kind of be like, I'm going to plow this, I'm going to keep going. And that's much of cable networks. So, you know, who's a winner, who's a loser here? I don't know. But I will say that I have no advice to offer you except do what feels right, and also have the, I guess, get the adaptability so that if something isn't working, you can switch and just go in the place that is better for you.
And also, if it makes you feel like crap all the time, it's not worth it. It's just not, right? Like if being on social media is always something that makes you feel horrible, no matter what advancement, slight advancement or visibility it gives you, it's not worth it.